Hey guys, this is David Gnewikow, and my son Dawson and I are getting ready to go to the Bass Nation High School National Championship next week. We're excited. He and his partner Andrew, we're going to go out there and compete out of Paris Landing for a few days and hopefully do well for the hometown team. So we're out here in the shop getting ready, tying some stuff on, and I want to talk a little bit about tuning a crankbait. And so this is a Strike King Series 5XD, one of the best kind of mid-sized crankbaits out there. On 12-pound line, this will run anywhere from 8 to 12, 13 feet, kind of depending on the speed. So I use this a lot on Kentucky Lake when those fish are kind of in that intermediate depth. Most of the time when you pull your Strike King bait out of the package, it runs true. I would say most of mine run true immediately. But you get to catching a few fish. Sometimes you'll say, well, that thing is just not tracking straight back to the boat. And a crankbait, to perform optimally, should always track straight back to the boat. So I'm gonna give you kind of 3 things to look at to make sure that your crankbait runs the best. The very first is the eye on the bill of the crankbait. That eye needs to be straight in line with the bait. This one is perfect. This bait runs tuned perfectly and it runs straight. But if your bait is running one side to the other, a lot of times you can visually see, okay, this little eye is off a little bit. You are gonna turn it the direction you want the bait to run. So if you're reeling your bait back to the boat and the bait runs to the left, so the bait is going, sorry, I gotta do it this way, I'm gonna turn the crankbait toward myself and say my bait is running to the left, and I'm gonna use my needle nose and I'm gonna bend that to the right. Or if my bait is running to the right, I'm gonna take my needle nose and I'm gonna bend that to the left. 2 things to look at. That eye needs to be perfectly straight and it needs to be perpendicular, straight up and down. So it takes very, very small movements to tune your crankbait. So I'll just barely move it. You can pitch the bait out 8, 10, 12 feet and reel it back and you'll almost immediately see a difference in what that'll do. So check to make sure that the eye on the bill is straight. Secondly, especially if you've been catching a bunch of fish on a bait and you say, man, this bait is running great, and then it stops running great. A lot of times what's happened is one of the eyes on the hook on the back where the hook mounts has gotten bent. So just make sure that those, again, are perfectly in line with the bait. Same thing on the bottom. You want to make sure your hooks can move freely. Sometimes if a hook gets caught, that'll cause the bait to not run straight. So check those 3 things. And then the last thing I like to do is talk about the knot a little bit. Now, Strike King rigs their baits with these oval eyes. And the oval eyes are much, much better than the round eyes for keeping a bait running true. Sometimes on the round eye, and I'll talk about that in a second, it can get to where your knot is off to the side and your bait won't run true. But I'm gonna tie a knot real quickly. And Dawson, my cameraman, is gonna zoom in on me tying a knot. I tie a double San Diego jam on fluorocarbon. Actually, I think I tie a modification of a double San Diego jam. So we'll just call this the David G knot. I'm gonna double my line. I'm gonna run it through the eye. I'm gonna bring that line up. I'm gonna pinch this end. I'm gonna pinch the tag end. So we've got the tag end hanging loose. I will spin, this is 12-pound line. I'll usually spin about 6 times on a double San Diego jam on 12-pound line. Heavier line, like 20, 25, I'll do 4 or 5, but we'll spin it 6 times. I don't know if that was 6 or not. We'll just assume that was 6. And I'm gonna bring it right back through the loop here. Wet the knot, cinch it down. That takes like 10 seconds to tie. There is no excuse not to retie when you can tie a knot that fast. I can honestly tell you I have never ever broken this knot. I have broken the line plenty of times, but I've never broken this knot. I like the double because it puts two pieces of line through the actual loop, whether that's on a jig or a hook eye or that. And again, when you cinch it down, it'll be nice and neat. Now, when you cut this, you do have to cut off. I'm gonna get it where you can see it here. There's actually 3 tag ends. There's 1 tag and there's a double tag. So I'm gonna get my clippers and I'm gonna clip that off. Okay, last thing I'll talk about on tuning the crankbait. It is important when you tune a crankbait that your line tie is right in the middle of that loop. And that's one reason that the oval split rings are much better than the round ones. If I'm using a round one, I will always try to put that knot in the gap between the two rings because it always keeps it in the center. If that knot gets off to the side, I'm going to do that with my fingers here. If your knot gets off to the side like that, it'll cause your bait to not run true. So if you've checked everything else, just make sure your line is tied right in the middle of your split ring. A true running crankbait's going to always catch more. It's going to always be more fun to fish than one that's running a little bit crazy. Good luck, tie on a 5XD and go get them.